Chapter 1807 Bugs. Owen's team of mutants had just recently arrived in Fremons, and when they heard about Zhang Yi's haul, their eyes reddened with jealousy. So having just arrived in Fremons, they found their way to Alto City through their own means without going through the normal process of applying to Fremons for action. Wanting to come over to pick up the pieces and see if they could discover something that Zhang Yi and Emperor Indra's team hadn't found. However, he did not expect that he had just come here and picked up a big one. Among the team, a short-haired female mutant wearing a silver combat uniform said, "Captain, what are we going to do?" Captain Parlor calmly said, "Don't rush. According to the intelligence, these guys are very tough in combat. That's why we have to make a well-thought-out plan. No matter how strong they are, as long as they are mutants there must be weaknesses. We have the advantage in numbers. Let Capone and Crodur assault from the front first to test out their abilities, and Winster and Pesci are in charge of long-range support. As for the rest of us, wait for them to reveal their cracks and then immediately attack from 6 directions to take them by surprise." Parlor methodically formulated his tactics. He was surrounded by elite mutants, and there were 3 Epsilon-level mutants including him. In his opinion, such a powerful team of mutants was also of the top level when looking at Europe. Therefore, what the Huashu Kingdom mutant team could do, they could certainly do it as well. At worst, they could keep the casualties within acceptable limits. Parlor's plan was perfect. The subordinates around them nodded while listening. In the past, under their captain's leadership, they could be said to be unbeatable. So this time, there would be no surprises. But just at this time, the expression on the face of that short-haired female mutant, Packy, suddenly became dull, and her already snow-white complexion became much paler. Parlor couldn't help but frown when he saw this look on her face. "Pesci, what's wrong? Did you memorize everything I said about the battle plan?" Pesci's mouth was open. She couldn't speak because of her surprise. Instead she reached out and pointed behind Parlor. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of her finger. On top of that ruin where they had concealed their forms, a pitch-black figure stood there quietly, wordlessly, as if it had already appeared for many hours. The demon god Jin. He looked down at everyone, his eyes devoid of any emotion, much less feeling any killing intent. But that body that was twice the size of an ordinary human, with a dark, ghostly aura of metal emanating from his body, still naturally brought a sense of fear. Discovered. Parlor calmed down in less than a second. Having been through 100 battles, what scene hadn't they seen before? He instantly pulled out an Edelman metal sword from his waist, the blade rubbing against the sheath, emitting a blood-boiling ka-ching-ching-ching. The sound of the blade rubbing against the sheath made people's blood boil. In an instant, monstrous flames burned up with him at the center. The entire sky was dyed red, and the distance between him and Jin was less than 30 meters, and to a mutant of his level, such a distance was tantamount to non-existence. He merely took a step, and his person rose up in the air to arrive in front of Jin. The long sword in his hand swung out, and endless crimson flames slammed into the demon god in front of him like a giant dragon. Endless remnant flame. Parlor, mutant codename Vulcancertor, Black Chariot level Epsilon. The power that erupted in an instant vaporized the ice and snow of the entire land, and although his teammates were used to fighting alongside Parlor, at this moment, they also felt the same dryness in their mouths, and the moisture within their bodies was almost dried up. In just a few moments, the war sword that was burning with a blazing flame swept towards demon god Jin's neck. The harsh blade of the sword, the blazing flames that could burn down everything, seemed as if it could take off the head of demon god Jin in an instant. Then, just when the blade was less than a centimeter away from Jin's neck, a black metal palm appeared before the blade and gently clamped it. Then, the sword would no longer be able to advance even a single point. Parlor froze in place, and all of Owen's mutants had expressions of horror beyond compare on their faces. It wasn't that they hadn't seen people who could block Parlor's attacks. But there had never been an existence that was able to catch Parlor's flaming battle sword with their own palms. Flame, it was one of the most destructive abilities. A trace of dismay appeared in Parlor's eyes, yet immediately afterward, he roared as his body, the battle sword in his hand, burned with even more raging flames. Red-colored flames erupted into the sky. The color gradually changed from crimson, and in the end, it even turned into the purest white flame. His entire person was burning, and the earth under his feet shattered apart due to the overly hot temperature. Even his subordinates' faces changed drastically as they hurriedly left the area. If it wasn't for the fact that our combat suits are specially made to resist high temperatures, I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to block the captain's ability. Pesci said resentfully. Everyone else's combat suits needed to be resistant to super low temperatures, only theirs was special. Because of Parlor's ability, he would often accidentally injure his teammates while fighting. If you were severely dehydrated, you could be directly turned into a human stem. Parlor erupted his strongest power, his eyes staring deathly at the demon god in front of him. The opponent's body was crafted from a special kind of metal, flickering with a dark and cold light amidst the firelight. It was impossible for any metal known on this planet to hold back such terrifying heat. However, Jin's body did not show the slightest sign of melting under the flames. Inside Jin's eyes, a look of unease finally appeared. He subconsciously wanted to draw his sword and then turn around to fight again. However, it was as if that battle sword was frozen in this space, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pull it out. Jin looked at him silently, and those emotionless eyes gradually lit up with red light. A powerful and dangerous aura with the smell of death enveloped Parlor completely. Almost instinctively, he let go of his hand and abandoned his battle sword, then retreated backward with a backward jump. 2 red-colored lasers had already shot out from among Jin's eyes and shot towards his torso. As fast as Parlor was, he couldn't outrun this close attack. When he chose to stick close to Slash, the space distance between the two of them was meaningless. In this mutual explosion style of fighting, one of them was bound to be taken out quickly. However, the attack he put his best foot forward did not injure the demon god Jin in the slightest. He realized a horrifying problem: the strength of the demon god was not as weak as he thought. What the chaos of Huashu Kingdom could do, he might not be able to do. There was no time left for him to think, as Jin's laser had already arrived in front of him. His mouth let out a roar of rage, an act that could provide a creature like a human with great courage, as well as a better way to bring his body's strength into play. Flames coalesced in front of him, enveloping him like a bathrobe. Thud! In the next instant, the red laser pierced through his defenses. Parlor lowered his head in dismay as he felt the power of life being withdrawn from amongst his body. There was nothing left of his chest but a huge empty hole. And inside Jin's eyes, the vital signs and energy responses of the life form in front of him were rapidly weakening. As an android, he was the most elite fighter species among the mechanical civilization. Through battles with the enemy, he would slowly collect all the information of the entire enemy. And for enemies like this who fought through bursts of high energy, he was the most comfortable in dealing with them. Because he only needed to judge how high to adjust the output power according to its energy response, he could precisely break through the opponent's defense without causing waste. He was an android, not a mutant, so his battles were more calculated. Plain and simple. Jin dropped the battle sword in his hand, a rudimentary weapon from a backward civilization that he didn't even look at. Turning to Parlor, he took out a huge battle sword from his back, a curved sword that was almost as long as his body and had a dozen or so red energy crystals embedded in it. Swish! His body swept by as a black residual shadow, chopping off Parlor's head in one complete swipe. A black chariot-level mutant was slashed so easily. The mutants of Owens watched as their captain was beheaded, and from the beginning to the end, they didn't even have the chance to make a move. The strength of the enemy had exceeded their imagination. This was an opponent they had never encountered since the end of the world. Despair, utter despair enveloped their hearts. There wasn't even the thought of resisting anymore. Jin killed Parlor and casually glanced at them. But just when everyone thought they were going to die, Jin turned around and left the place. Judgment can't pose any threat and doesn't need to be removed. Jin didn't have a penchant for slaughter. To the demon gods, everything they did was a janitor-like job, clearing the way for the goal of an entire civilization. Killing humans? Just some weak bugs. There was nothing to be proud of in killing them, much less the pleasure that came from killing. Who would be smug about stepping on ants? Even if they were to step on them, they would only step on the one that looks slightly bigger among the ants. After Jin returned, he and Wu continued to discuss the value of excavating this land. They still decided to send an engineering unit to do some digging. They were not willing to let go of even the slightest chance. It took Owen's mutants a long time before they realized that the other party had no thoughts of killing them. They weren't even qualified to be killed, which both humiliated them and made them incredibly grateful. Immediately, they directly fled back, not even going to Samaran City, just briefly talking about the situation with Fremon's people, and then hurried back to Owen's. It was thought that from now on, they wouldn't belittle the overlords of the other kingdoms in this world because of the small achievements they had made around Owen's. The news of Owen's mutant forces' defeat and escape came, and Zhang Yi received the news at the first time as well. He did not have any surprises. Those who hadn't crossed paths with demon gods were not at all sure how strong they were. Zhang Yi was able to defeat him with relative ease solely because everything under heaven was too buggy. No matter how strong the combat skills of a demon god as an android were, it was all but impossible to perform in the face of a defense layer that was almost impenetrable on a physical level. But others weren't so lucky. More and more demon gods are starting to show up. The real war is just beginning now. So Big Boss, what are you going to do next? Ling's voice came from not too far away, her face indifferent as she held the electronic device inside her hand. Zhang Yi looked towards her, and a smile played at the corner of her mouth. In my hands, but I still have a lot of valuable intelligence. You didn't have any use for the information last time, so I can offer it to you at half price this time. Zhang Yi stared at her seriously and asked word by word, can you confirm the presence of the 10 demon gods? That's very difficult. Ling wrinkled her nose, but then she spread her hands and said, however, it's not like I can't give it a try if you offer the right price. Zhang Yi's eyes were lightly lowered. Ling gave him a mysterious feeling, and for now, it seemed that she might have come into contact with figures in the source area of Fremon's higher echelons. After all the information she had said was something that ordinary people simply could not possibly come into contact with. Fine, as long as your intelligence is accurate, the price is whatever you want. Zhang Yi said in a very atmospheric manner. Intelligence was life on the battlefield, and Zhang Yi never skimped on the price of obtaining it. Ling smiled happily, that would be great. Then this time, the price I want is 10 times more than before. Zhang Yi didn't talk nonsense and directly took out the metamaterial storage jar from dimensional space and gave it to her. Ling used a very large backpack to put them away, and then once again sent Zhang Yi an intelligence map. It was still the same as last time, with markings in different colors on top of Fremon's map. The locations marked above are the areas where the mechanical life forms have been active in the recent moments. The darker the color, the more frequent the mechanical life form activity in that area. As for the areas marked in red, there is a high probability that there are demon god activities. Ling smiled and winked at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi smiled, thanks a lot. Ling shrugged her shoulders, no need to be polite, I'm just getting paid to do a job. With that, she lowered her head and continued fiddling with her electronic devices. Zhang Yi felt that Ling was becoming more and more mysterious. She had been operating at Zhang Yi and their residence, and Zhang Yi had intentionally sidetracked her when discussing important matters, fearing that she would leak information. From the beginning to the end, she had not been seen leaving either, but she was able to get hold of Fremon's first-hand information. This couldn't help but make people wonder how on earth she managed to do all this. More and more kingdoms were joining in this resource division. Fremon's didn't need to do anything to needed to do to get 30% of the proceeds, and they were certainly happy about it. However, this situation did not last. From the moment Zhang Yi killed the demon god deck, the controllers of the mechanical civilization finally began to raise their eyes and take a look at these weak and annoying creatures on the surface. The flames of war ignited in every part of Fremon's land. And those combat-type mechanical life forms that originally didn't even bother to take care of the humans, finally began to emerge from beneath the earth and began to purge the humans.